I get hiccups. Fuck. Hello folks, hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be going through my top reads of 2020. I have my top 10 favorite books, and then I'm gonna mention a couple of runner-up titles that were in consideration but didn't quite make the top 10. I'm just gonna go through the top 10. They are in no particular order, because that's too much pressure. Yeah, let's get into it. So I started tracking my reading in June, so I only tracked my reading for like 6 months, and I read 78 books. You'd think I'd remember because I made a whole video about talking about my 2020 reading stats. I think it was 78. I'm sure my notes are somewhere in this notebook, but I'm not gonna, nope, move forward. I did not write author names down, so if I remember the names, great, and if I don't, well, I'm going to be putting a picture of the cover, and also all the books I mentioned are going to be written in the description box below if you would like to refer to them in the future. Book number 1, Jade City by Fonda. This was one I read fairly early on, I think, and while reading it, it felt like a favorite, and I just loved it so much, and that feeling has just stayed with me to this moment. It was such a great experience. The third book in the trilogy comes out this year. It was fun, but also like it was a good balance of like a really tense, involved storyline, but also like being really fun. Like, I mean, kung fu fight scenes, great. But yeah, I think it's a really, really well-crafted world. I loved the characters. I loved the character developments. There were twists I didn't see coming. I loved the integration of cultural and political intrigue. That was an easy choice. It was an easy in my top 10. Next book that was a top 10 was The Fifth Season. This is one that I read in December. This is one that I had bought fairly early on in the year and just didn't get around to reading it. Yeah, this was, the hype is real. I'm glad this is a complete series so that when I am ready to get back into that series, I can just binge the whole thing. This was a really interesting, like, climate disaster influenced fantasy. I loved the way the three narratives were connected. I loved the themes of family, of otherness, of all the things. I thought the events of the world and the development and presentation of the magic system was really interesting. Great. I want more. I want more. The next book is a happier one. This is A Long Way to a Small, Angry Planet. I love the description of this writer's genre as hope punk. Even though the characters in this book go through challenging things, there's a lot of like, are we gonna survive? Is someone gonna get shot? Is our ship gonna survive? There was this amazing sense of camaraderie and family in this whole crew. The use of alien races to explore and challenge a lot of cultural norms of humans, I thought was really well done in a way that didn't associate aliens with otherness, because that can sometimes get a little messy. I think I saw that like the 4th book in the series has just come out or just been announced or something. So I don't know if this is a complete series at this point, but there are several books in the series, so I look forward to diving back into it. It's great. Yeah. The next one is The Hate You Give by, what is this author's name? Angie Thomas. This one I read on audiobook. One of my favorite audiobooks that I read in the past year. I thought the narrator was not just so good at finding the voice of the main character Star, but of voicing all of the characters. This isn't a brand new release, but the topics are still really relevant. And I think this book has a really important place in the conversation of not just the prevalence of police violence, but the way that the violence, it doesn't just affect the people who are directly harmed by the police, but the way that that radiates throughout the entire community. I don't feel like this is a book that I'm going to rush to reread. I don't necessarily need to want to reread it in order for it to be one of my favorites, but it is one of the easiest criteria. But sometimes I feel like I don't need to return to the world and it can still be a favorite, and this is one of them. I'm definitely looking forward to reading more works by Angie Thomas. The companion novel to The Hate U Give just came out earlier this year, Concrete Rose. This follows Star's father. So I'm on hold for that at the library. I'm really excited to experience more of her work. Okay, the next book that was a favorite was also a book I experienced through audio. This is Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. This was a book that made me smile so much while I was listening to it. Sometimes it made me cry. Tears of all of the feelings. It's like, it's one of those like, I'm not crying, you're crying kind of like, it's not just like sadness or relief, or it's just this bubbling of so many emotions. This was such a wonderful like coming of age and coming of identity story. And it was such a perfect thing to read during Pride Month because it takes place in the summer. It takes place around the Pride Parade, and I loved the theme of the process of self-discovery is always ongoing. I think that was so important. It's great. I love it. Yay. All right. Next book that was a favorite is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I had also read The Starless Sea early this year, and well, that one was a really beautiful experience and immediately made me want to read everything that Erin Morgenstern writes. The Night Circus is much more likely to be a world that I want to return to. I talk about this a little bit in my monthly review. I work in live theater, so the discussions about how the circus is this interactive storytelling process, I thought that was super interesting. I loved the romance, just like the tension of this romance of like, will they, won't they, can they, what the fuck is gonna happen to them? Like, it was tense without feeling overly tragic. The world is beautiful. I want to go to that circus. I want it to be a real thing. But also, if it was a real thing, there's lots of scary implications with that. Anyway, it was beautiful. The next book that was kind of a surprise favorite is A Hero Born by Yong. This was also a December read. This was a book I read for Translate-a-thon, and it's the first installment in a translation of this famous Chinese epic fantasy that in English is called Legends of the Condor. And it's got several TV and movie adaptations as well. And I just had so much fun with it. I listened to it on both audiobook and physically reading it because I do agree with some of the critiques of the translation, especially that the naming conventions are really inconsistent. I agree with that. I mean, I think I benefited from it as someone who's not used to Chinese naming conventions. It was helpful when there was like an English translation of it, but I can also get the fuck over it. You know, just because a name is unfamiliar doesn't mean I'm not capable of learning it. So like, while I agree with some of the translation critiques, I think it really speaks to the story and the world as a whole that it was still fucking amazing. The kung fu fight scenes were also just so interesting and so much fun, similar to Jade City. Apparently this is the year I discovered that I like reading about kung fu. Who knew? Yeah, I look forward to reading the rest of the series. The next one that was a favorite and just kind of stuck in my feelings the whole time, Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is like a post-apocalyptic sort of urban fantasy. Not really urban because cities have been destroyed, but it's that kind of like fast-paced action monster hunter feeling. And I loved our protagonist. I loved that her strength had come at such a cost, and it was something that she was still wrestling with. And having read the second book, Storm of Locusts, I know that like that is something that she continues to wrestle with, and I love the character development that has happened and that I can foresee happening. I love the representation of Navajo mythology. Yes, give me all of the mythology. Give me all of the world mythology. I want all of it. Even though, like, there are some very difficult themes in this series, I talk about this in another review, that, like, I always feel somewhat safe. I always feel like our protagonist has one more trick up their sleeve and they're gonna get out of it. You know, whatever their tough situation, they are gonna live to fight another day. It might come at a cost. I'm not really sure how we're gonna get there, but there is comfort in this genre and the mood of it that even if we live on a cliffhanger or something, like, overall, things are going to be okay. And that's great. And the last book that made my top 10, Foundry Side. This was a book I talked about in my very first video. It still just has stuck with me as one of my favorite magic systems. It's based on logical arguments. It's been compared to like computer coding, and I love how intricate and clever the magic system is. I need to reread this series because especially by the end of the second book I felt like a little bit overwhelmed by this bigger story that is happening with the Hierophants, but I'm excited to revisit it. And really just like the world and the magic system, just, it's so clever, it's so interesting, and I really love when something in the world is very clever and I'm able to follow it because it makes me feel clever. Yay, I like things that help me feel maybe more smart than I am. Lovely. Great. Those are my top 10. And I've got... Wait. Oh, I missed one. I'm sorry. My actual top 10 also includes The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. This is the only nonfiction. I'm pushing myself to read more nonfiction. I've read a lot of great nonfiction, but like in terms of my top 10 is also heavily influenced by reading preferences and feelings. I'll elaborate a little bit more in my runner-ups. But I feel like this is the nonfiction that I really want to own a physical copy of so that I can go back and refer to it. It's very data heavy. I talk about how I wouldn't recommend it as like a beginner social justice information book, but I feel like if you have a little bit of a foundation about policing in America and our justice system and the way that it perpetrates white supremacy and racist ideologies, I feel like it is so valuable. It makes such a compelling argument and it refers to so many things. It's I don't know how to really even talk about. I feel like I retain like 5% of this book, so I want to revisit it. And I have such appreciation for the mountain of research that is present in this book. Top 10. Yay. Okay. And then I've got 5 runner-ups. It feels like a lot, but I've got something to say for each of them. First runner-up, The Undocumented Americans. This one like almost made it into the top 10. So while I say that like my top 10 are not really in any kind of ranked order, this one would be number 11. It is at the top of the list of the runner-ups. This one was such an interesting blend of memoir and investigative journalism. It's something that I think is really challenging, the idea of journalism being unbiased, because like there really is no way to be unbiased. All you can do is try and tell the truth the way that you experience it. I think that this is a really, really valuable book. I gifted it to my dad for Christmas. It's not, well, he does read a lot of nonfiction. He doesn't read a lot of like current history nonfiction, but I feel like this one is like everyone should read. I think it's just going to challenge a lot of the rhetoric that is present in this country around being undocumented and the process of citizenship and just like their existence in this country and like why they're here and why they stay, you know. And I feel like the only reason it's not in my top 10 is that nonfiction's just not my favorite genre. I am growing to like it, and I'm growing to understand what I like in that genre, but like science fiction and fantasy are really just, they're gonna it's my comfort place, and I'm not going to apologize that my favorites are things that often make me feel good. Next runner up, The Poppy War. Not in my top 10. I will say I do think it's one of the best written books that I read all year. I think the hype is real. I mentioned this in my December wrap-up a little bit. I'm probably going to repeat a lot of what I said. While I do think it's one of the best written books I've read, it just doesn't sit in my feelings quite as much as some of my favorites. I feel like, while I am excited to finish the series, I feel like once I finish it, I'm gonna feel done with it. I might not really feel like I want to return to it. Though I wouldn't be surprised if, in reading the whole series, if my feelings about the whole series are different than what I feel about the first book. Because some of what kind of fell a little short for me in the first book, like I feel like the vagueness of the magic, some of the character development, and like the vagueness of the god pantheon, it is quite possible that stuff gets developed in a way that I like in the rest of the series, and so I might love other books in the series more than I like the first one. It just depends on where the story goes. I am very excited to finish reading it. I'm also glad that it's a finished series so that I can binge the whole thing. Our next contender was Elazoe by Darcie Badger. This is one that I am very excited to reread and maybe reread more slowly and spend more time with it. I think the thing, as much as I love it, I think the thing that fell a little flat with me was I felt there was something about maybe the writing or the storytelling or something about like the whole I felt like my feelings were pretty static throughout the whole book. There were a couple of moments where I was like, oh, I see what you're doing, and that's really interesting. But it was less about actual like plot reveals or character development or something, or like actual events, and more about just kind of like figuring out something that was happening with the writing. It's one that I love recommending, and I do think it is a wonderful story, and I really enjoyed it, and I want to return to it. It was a contender, but not quite top 10. And then the last runner-up is Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Like, this was initially a contender because I felt so many things while reading it. Definitely cried at the end. A lot of people do. And there's just a lot in the story that, like, I relate to, and it was just such a powerful experience to read. But do I feel like I'm gonna reread it? Probably not. That's not the most important criteria in determining what my favorite is, but it maybe because like it's not a sci-fi or a fantasy, I feel like once I've been through that world, I don't really feel pulled to go through it again in the same way. So it's great. You know, I think about it a lot, but after having some distance from it, I feel just kind of like pleasantly about it, and that's okay. Anyway, yay! So those were my top reads of 2020, or at least like in the second half of 2020 when my reading just ramped up. I would love to hear, have you read any of these? Are you excited to read them? Did any of these make it into your top 10? I'd love to know. Let's chat in the comments. I will have the list of all of the books I will have links to my various other social media places in the description box if you would like to connect with me elsewhere. I will catch you all in my next video. Bye!